I did it.
Fantastic. So we're off to a great start. So far, everything is happening without any technical difficulties. Welcome to this weekend's CASAA Live. Everybody in chat, we'll just go down the list here. Addie Tooney, Apathy Miller, Adrian Mason, Mike Berg, Pam Spraggins. Not trying to repeat names here. Shannon Ole, Cemetery Gates, ominous name for a vape chat. NorCal Vaping. I think I got everybody so far. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We have once again a very special guest, and we'll get right to this because we're all working on some time constraints here. So without further ado, we'll get right into it with our friend, author, writer, critical thinker, Jacob Grier. Or am I? There we go.
Here we go.
Everybody. I was waiting to pop up on the screen. I was like, all right, here we go.
Well, I wasn't sure if Alex was going to hit the button or if I was supposed to. Our first glitch. Oh, no.
Pretty quickly ended
I was thinking, do I have to hit a button? Am I the one messing this up? No. All right.
No, not at all.
Go team. Oh. Well, we're all here. And thanks for joining us on a Saturday and a holiday weekend.
Yeah, always good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And
I think you're like the most featured guest we've had now officially with three. This is your third time.
Third time around. Wow. All right.
So as mentioned at the top, we are here to talk about Jacob's new book, the new Prohibition, the Dangerous Politics of Tobacco Control, which is really a collection of articles that you've already published. And I'll just say, who thinks go look them up. No, it's a great collection of articles. Jacob's excellent writing on this topic. And one of the things I was thinking the whole time was, this is a great, I had the words in my head like yesterday, but it's a crash course. It's a very thoughtful crash course in tobacco harm reduction and the policies that we're all dealing with. And so it sort of led me to the question of why put this all together and why now?
Yeah, so I was on the show before from my previous book, the Rediscovery of Tobacco, and as yes, there we go. Yeah, I've got one too.
Mine are on Kindle, so I can't hold it up.
Yeah, right. As I mentioned in the introduction to the new book, I spent a long time on the Rediscovery of Tobacco, and it came out in 2019, and I had pictured it as like the last thing I ever really need to write about tobacco issues. I was like, I've got everything out in a linear argument. I've covered all the bases. Maybe I'll move on and start doing something else now. And then it ended up the past few years were really eventful, as I'm sure everyone who follows this knows. There's been a lot going on in the space of tobacco control and harm reduction with vaping. So I just kept writing and finding more and more things that I felt needed coverage and that I could maybe tackle in a more clear way as well. And so a few months ago, I was kind of looking over the past few years of work, and I just realized that I've got all this new material that is thematically connected, all tied up with this idea of going down the path of prohibition. And so, I put them together. I realized it was enough for a new book. And to add a little value and to tie it all together, I did write a brand new introduction of about 2,500 words. So that explains a lot about the book. So if you buy it, you get one thing new. It's not all previously published, but I really wrote it because I had all these articles that thematically were connected, but they were scattered around the web in different publications. And I felt like these ideas were important enough to bring them all together in one book that somebody who maybe doesn't follow my work or has only read a little bit of it or who's just totally new to the topic altogether could get all this information in one place. So if you follow me and like you read my work, I take no offense if you don't buy the new book, but maybe buy a copy and give it to somebody who would benefit from reading it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't take offense either, but I will say I think for our part, this is a valuable resource. It's not as dense as say something like Ashes to Ashes, but this really does have and with an appreciation for nuance and complexity, and when talking about policies in a book that is deceptively small, I think we covered it here. So
yeah, I was going to say I didn't want
a little thicker. If you want to feel smarter, get the hardcover.
Get the hardcover. Yeah.
There's like another 1/4 inch in thickness there.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, you said you added that big intro, which was great. I just wanted the audience to understand that this is not a hard read. This is not something that's all you're gonna relate to it. It's gonna go really fast. I mean, I started reading it yesterday. I finished it this morning after a couple hours. So I mean, and I've been doing this since 2009, and I still learned some stuff from it. So yeah, so if the audience, and this is to the audience, they don't think you've heard it all. Don't think, because I mean, I've probably read all of Jacob's articles too, and not just on this topic. And it was a really great refresher. I'm like, oh, when did he write this one? You know, so it all came back. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's not just about vaping; it's about how we got here too, the whole background. So, which you must have found was really interesting, huh?
Yeah, and that's one of the things about the book is it's divided into 4 sections, and the second section is about issues regarding smoking bans, which if you're in the vape community probably isn't your biggest concern. Although there are now lots of places that are banning vaping in different places where smoking used to be banned. But I think people who maybe became new to this issue and didn't follow it a long time ago, and I've been writing about these issues since I want to say about 2008 or so. So I've been in it for a long time, is that the tactics that are used right now to damage tobacco harm reduction and to spread misinformation about vaping really come back to what was done in the debates over secondhand smoke and smoking bans back at the earlier part of the century. And that's not to say that there's zero risk with secondhand smoke. Obviously, it's not a desirable thing, but they were taken way out of proportion to what the risk actually were to create alarmism about the issue. And also to erase the idea that people who use nicotine or tobacco have any liberties that people need to care about. So when they erase the idea that people who smoke, and back then it was pretty much just smoking, vaping didn't really exist as much, that people who smoke have no rights to these public spaces or private spaces where only they can go, that really laid the groundwork for what we've seen with the fights over tobacco harm reduction. And sometimes it's the same people, as in Stanton Glantz. Like if you only know Stanton Glantz from his retracted study on vaping and other things he's said about vaping, you'll enjoy the chapter on what he said about secondhand smoke and made some really absurd claims back in the early 2000s.
The Helena miracle?
Yes, yeah, Helena, Montana.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah, I have a lot of quotes here that I'm putting up that are from that section that I thought was really important for our viewers to see, because a lot of vapors are just not aware of how much even they were manipulated during that time period that shapes how they feel even about themselves, about being vapors and being, having formerly smoked. It really makes you stop and think about, and this was a good one, was non-smokers have unleashed the coercive power of the state to claim ever more spaces for themselves, curtailing smokers' freedom and wiping out their social gatherings. And I mean, and it's true. It's like we went from you could smoke anywhere to you can't smoke anywhere, and suddenly it's like, well, you've got non-smokers' rights, but smokers don't have rights. And even like you said in the book, a place of their own. Why can't we have a place of our own to go? Why can't you vape in a vape shop? How many non-vapors are going to walk into a vape shop? Why can't you vape in a smoking bar that, and like you pointed out, the tables have turned, and now there's far more places where you can go that you aren't going to run into people smoking. So having 1 or 2 places just seems like, why can't you do that?
Yeah. And if you talk to normal people, and by normal people, I mean people who don't work in tobacco control as a career, they support smoking bans in the abstract. Like they're glad that they can go out and they don't have to think about whether they're going to be exposed to cigarette smoke or come home smelling like cigarette smoke. And that's really their main concern. They're not the ones saying that it should be illegal to have a cigar bar in the entire state of Washington or the entire state of North Dakota,
right?
Or that it should be illegal to open a new one where I live in Oregon. And when you talk to normal people, and a lot of them don't even realize this is the case. they would just assume that there's these exemptions for places like that. But the laws are written by people with much more extreme stances and lots of funding from Bloomberg. So people who don't pay attention to the issue end up supporting laws that are more restrictive than I think they would really endorse if they were asked in the abstract or asked about specifics about what maybe should be allowed.
Speaking of South Dakota, and I think you noted the update in the book that this year there was a bill introduced to allow for new cigar bars in South Dakota. And I had seen, I think Half Wheel might have reported on it recently that the bill, I think, has passed at least the first chamber. So it is progressing, and it sounds promising that North Dakota may be able to have cigar bars soon.
I hope so. I know they passed one chamber back when I first wrote that, which I think was 2020, or maybe 2021. So yeah, and then it narrowly lost in the second chamber. So fingers crossed. Yeah, this time.
Yeah, we'll see. So speaking of all the secondhand and third-hand smoke stuff, one question that came to mind was, with the outrageous claims of third-hand smoke, and for those who don't know, and not to give anything away about the book, go buy the book, but talking about this idea that people who smoke themselves are toxic and dangerous to be around. I mean, what an outrageous claim to begin with, but in an age of chemophobia, certainly that had some legs. But in your reporting and following this issue, did third-hand smoke reach a level of credibility that, and even with secondhand smoke, now that we have the ability to go back and kind of check that and see, like, okay, no, it's not that dangerous for people to be around, and not to go too far off the rails, but I remember, I think it was either when I first started vaping or I was still smoking. I remember hearing a guest on a WNYC program, and this person was talking about how, banning smoking in Central Park or parks around New York City, it had nothing to do with protecting the public. It was all about pressuring people who smoke to quit. And so now that has sort of come out, have you seen or do you think about tobacco control broadly losing credibility?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the third-hand smoke issue come up in the past few years, and I'm not really sure why that is. But if anytime you look at the actual studies or like meta-analysis done in serious scientific journals on third-hand smoke, they're always very careful to say that this is all speculative right now. Like, we know the substance exists. Like, anybody knows it exists. You can smell it on your clothes. But then they always say, like, we need to do epidemiological work to find out if this is actually harmful. Nobody really knows what the risks possibly are. But no, I've been shocked at how uncritical the coverage it gets is when the scientists behind this then send out a press release and go on a campaign to get it covered. And you've got publications like the New York Times and Scientific American just kind of uncritically elevating these views without ever taking a step back and seeing how realistic they are. Like the New York Times example is particularly egregious. It was about a study that involved no epidemiological work at all. It was literally just a phone survey where these doctors at Harvard, hired a firm to call random people and do a survey and just say, hey, are you concerned about this stuff called third-hand smoke? And that was the entire basis for a big New York Times article about this new danger that people were unaware of. So I don't think it's really hurt their credibility because I don't think most people really paid attention to it, but it definitely made me lose confidence in some journalists. I'll put it that way. The fact that they didn't push back on this idea at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and I know that this is, a lot of people in the drug policy reform space have talked about this, and it's, I think. I'm forgetting who it was, either on the Daily Show or it could have been Last Week Tonight, John Oliver. Someone kind of went after journalism and journalists and reporting on the drug war and this sort of lazy reliance on statements from, you know, local PD or the sheriff, and of course all they're going to deliver are their propaganda talking points. And so it's sort of across a lot of issues. It seems this problem of not pushing back or asking critical questions about you know, what people are promoting in terms of research or policy or even a crime scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a problem across the board. I do think, I mean, I feel like local news is going to have a hard time with these issues no matter where they come down. You know, they just don't have the resources or the time to really investigate, and they're more interested in doing a short bit on whatever the story is. I think it is disappointing when, you know, national news outlets, which tend to be more liberal, have this blind spot on nicotine and tobacco, where, you know, on issues like cannabis or alcohol and increasingly even some other drugs, there is some skepticism of, you know, things that are said by prohibitionists. Like there's pushback against the idea that police officers are, you know, going into shock from touching fentanyl, which we know it doesn't actually happen. But there's really no pushback in that community on anything related to nicotine. And it's so rare to find journalists of any persuasion, but especially in the sort of the mainstream liberal outlets like the New York Times. And I'm a New York Times subscriber, and I'm a liberal journalist. Like I'm talking about my own people here, and I think, you know, the New York Times is a great newspaper. I'm not trying to be one of these people who comes out and bashes the mainstream media, but on this issue, they're terrible, and they're consistently terrible and have been for years, and so it's really frustrating.
Yeah, and a lot of this, and I think this is one of the themes that you picked up, you know, throughout your coverage of this is, and certainly it's kind of front and center in a few of the articles that you've included in the book, is this idea of dehumanizing and stigmatizing people who smoke to that point. And we've said this probably already in this hour, is that, you know, portraying us as sort of rubes who've been duped by the tobacco companies, and that's right in the.
Yep, you're breaking up, Alex.
Oh, am I? Yeah. Wow, everything. I just got a screen that says I'm uploading recordings.
Oh, I wonder if you like ended up logging out for a second when
I didn't touch anything.
No, I mean when it buffered. The system
okay.
might have thought that you left and came back or something. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Well, I completely lost my train of thought there. But what
you were talking about how we were treated like we were duped, and I have a good quote for this one. I'll put up on the screen. How we were like that consumers were duped by big tobacco or
right.
addicts,
so
I think is what you were going to say.
As a result of the campaigns, we've all been portrayed as victims of tobacco companies. We have no agency. Even deciding to smoke that first cigarette wasn't our own choice. And in line with that, recently we've heard and read things about changing the language about how we talk about people who smoke, people who use nicotine. And I know that what you have written, a lot of what you've written here was published, you know, prior to any conversation being elevated to the point where more people are talking about it. But at any point, you know, you certainly took the opportunity to provide context on issues that, you know, since you wrote about it, I don't know, even a year ago, things have changed, and there's sort of that bracketed update, you know, here's what's going on now. Mm-hmm. Did you think at all, this is a two-part question, in putting all of this stuff together, did you have a thought at all about going back and replacing use of the word smoker? And then the second part is, going forward as a writer, what challenges do you face in incorporating, kind of updating your language in your work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one I've thought about a lot. Like even prior to this new book coming out, and you know, these conversations about language, which I know Skip Murray has been a big advocate of, and it has made me use the phrase "people who smoke" more often. I will say, for two reasons, I don't use it all the time. One is that I write about this a lot, and I write long articles, and just from a language perspective, to always say people who smoke and not ever being able to say smoker, it just becomes too repetitive. and unstylistic. So I do use both. The other reason is I thought about this before, where I used to not, I got into this whole issue because I like an occasional cigar. And that's what got me into the writing about smoking bans way back in the early 2000s, was seeing the cigar lounges that I would go to be threatened with closure. And back then, I would always distance myself from the idea that I was a smoker. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm not a smoker. I just like an occasional cigar. I'm not one of those smokers." And I thought that was realized that was self-defeating. And so I actually started using the phrase myself, because I'm like, no, I am a smoker. Like we are all in this together of fighting restrictions on our liberty. So I actually came around to embracing the term somewhat in a way that derogatory terms are often used by the people that they're used to refer to kind of take them back.
Yeah, no, it is definitely one of those things. We haven't as a society reached this point, but I suspect, actually, I have no confidence we'll get to a point where it is socially acceptable for us to call one another smokers, but not them. But I do believe, I mean, that is a standard, I think, that researchers and policymakers should be held to. They are not, undertaking some sort of journalistic enterprise or writing thoughtfully about this. They are just, regurgitating studies and whatnot, or doing the research. And I think, for our part, I think one of the directions we're moving in is as an organization, at least more forcefully, it's always been part of our mission, but, including people who use the products in the science and policymaking decisions. So any amount that anybody can do to get there is appreciative. But I do understand, there are stylistic constraints, and definitely I was working on something, and if you had to write people with lived experience 20 times in some sort of paper, it starts to hurt. It physically starts to hurt.
Yeah.
And anybody who doesn't believe me, go read legislation from Maryland. It is nothing is shortened. It is painful on the face to read.
Yeah. And like going back to what you said before about people not respecting the agency of people who smoke or vape or use any kind of tobacco product, and the way the media covers this, like I definitely saw this frustration here in Oregon, because where I live, which is Portland, we just had a county-wide ban on all flavored nicotine and tobacco products across the board just passed. Mm-hmm. And if you looked at any of the news coverage from pretty much every publication and TV channel that we have here, they would say they're going to go get the pro side, and the pro side is some scientist or nonprofit advocate who's going to take a very seemingly selfless point of view on how we have to protect people and ban these products. And then when they try to get the anti side, the only people they ever think of to talk to were store owners. And store owners ultimately aren't who this is about. It's about people who use them, and also the people who can make the case for harm reduction. And that never gets brought up in any of the coverage here.
No, and it's the same here. Vermont is, I get TV stations from Vermont, and they're looking at their own statewide flavor ban. And similarly, it was the same. It's like somebody's got there's just a boilerplate out there that says this is how you cover the vaping issue. And it was, I was hopeful that there would be someone who actually uses the products featured, but no, they went to a shop owner, and it was the same response we've heard all over the country. Is, yep, this will definitely hurt my business. And that's pretty much where they leave it off. They don't get into harm reduction or people quitting smoking.
Right.
And
then
that's what this quote is about too.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, and then it becomes the story of the business owner versus the public health. Right. And of course,
and that's why I pulled,
public health.
And that's one of our frustrations as consumers, and that's one of the reasons why I pulled this quote. I mean, I just love that line of the coverage of the topic presents it as a business story or a political drama. I missed an A there when I was typing it out. With focus on the future of Juul or the use of e-cigarettes among youth, but of the 8 to 10 million American adults who vape and may be driven to smoking, or the 34 million Americans who smoke and are being denied access to safer alternatives, there's hardly a word, which is so true. And then even if we do get some of the new, and this was a topic I wanted to touch on that you had in the book that a lot of people kind of pull away from, and you didn't, was that even the people who have sort of embraced tobacco harm reduction aren't always, like you said, they're like prohibition light. They don't really seem to, they still have too much of the tobacco control mentality to see vapors and people who smoke or used to smoke as people. Like you said, they're people who are seeking nicotine and need safer alternatives. That's all. Or nicotine users who are seeking alternative. I forget how you say it. I should probably pull the quote up. But how did you feel when you started seeing that? Even our friends were not quite our friends.
Yes, a divide I have with some of the more academic people in tobacco control when we talk about this. Oh yeah, perfect, great. And yeah, so I use the concept in the book. I think I call it side constraints, which is that it's good to have this public policy goal of eliminating deaths from smoking and trying to make people smoke less. And there's all kinds of ways you can do that, from educational campaigns to taxes to restricting where people can smoke to obviously promoting safer alternatives, which is a fairly new thing that a lot of people are hostile to, but everybody on this call is probably very in favor of. You can do all those things and still recognize that there are constraints on what you should be capable of doing in a liberal society. And I think that comes down to a basic, respect for adults' bodily autonomy. And say, there's a lot you can do to discourage vaping and a lot you can do to discourage smoking or whatever you want to discourage. But at the end of the day, if you're telling a consenting adult that they can't have a strawberry vape or they can't have a cigar or they can't even have a cigarette, I think you've gone too far and you've started imposing your will on them in ways that shouldn't be acceptable in a liberal society.
That actually, it sets up, one of the things you discuss in I think it's the first section, the future of tobacco. You talked about your experience. Was it in Switzerland trying to buy an IQOS?
It wasn't even trying to buy. Yeah. So I was invited on a press trip to the Philip Morris research headquarters, which before anybody says anything, I paid for all my travel because that's the first thing people will say is that, oh, you're in Philip Morris's pocket.
You shall.
Yeah. It was a fun trip. Switzerland's great. But yeah, we the whole trip was because they wanted to talk about IQOS and all the research they're doing on heat not burn and their innovation. And they wouldn't let me try one, which I understood why they do it, and it's because they're really trying to protect this image of this is only for people who smoke to get them onto this safer product, and we don't want people who aren't doing that to do it. So me and the other journalists on the trip, they asked us, like, do you guys smoke cigarettes? We both said no. And they're like, well, you can't try this, but we'll tell you about it. So I have tried them before. I've had friends who have them, but was not allowed to do it there.
Yeah, and it's something that CASAA has been openly critical of PMI about, not, I don't know if critical is the right word, but it does check some box there. But questioning the wisdom of restricting IQOS to people who currently smoke. It's a product that, like vaping, if that's the first place you land, you're already starting off better than folks who are sort of limited to buying cigarettes. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that up again. It's one of those things where I think in PMI's case, as you stated, it's more of a concern about image and, trying to promote themselves as ending smoking as the company that popularized smoking. I don't know how much of that is in the vein of, some of our some of our friends, some of our allies are still sort of rigidly in that kind of medicalized rollout of harm reduction, rather than giving free thinking adults the ability to choose. And we do like safer alternatives. It's just,
I just want to say that I've often used two different examples with that. And one is, it's like saying you can't use condoms until you've gotten a sexually transmitted disease, or that you can't use your seatbelt until you've been in a car accident.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. Because people are going to use nicotine. So basically you're saying, okay, we won't even allow you in the store to buy these products, but there's 15 gas stations down the road you can go buy cigarettes at. Go to it. Then come back and we'll let you have an IQOS.
Yeah, right.
I mean, just the rationale of that just doesn't make any sense at all. I'm trying to think there was one other. Go ahead.
So, I think, one of the things I was thinking about that, I don't know that you got into it, but this is sort of on my radar a lot. I'm looking through my notes to see if I wrote down something that sounds intelligent. Well, it was about flavors and nicotine pouches and smokeless in general. Being someone who's covered is the gastronomy of alcohol a thing, or covering at least the interesting cocktails and whatnot that we get out of alcohol, and just being around flavor preferences, in particular Americans. I know, because my dad worked for a candy company, that Americans prefer sweeter things generally. Like, it's not just kids. And so one of the things that has been kind of rattling around in my head is, I would love to see nicotine pouches everywhere. I think it is the nicotine product that anybody who currently smokes or has used tobacco in the past and has kind of been, brainwashed by the outsized claims of harm from smokeless tobacco products are going to be more interested in perhaps switching to nicotine pouches. But it's the same problem that vapor has, right? There's no non-flavored nicotine pouch. It's either, it's tobacco flavored, maybe, and then they've got the freedom to go wherever they want. So I guess the question was, given your background in beverage and so on, are companies going to have to make these America sweet products to appeal to the American consumer, or could we see an part of companies actually?
You're breaking up again. It's almost completely broken up now.
Yeah, I missed the end of the question there.
Yeah. Okay, you're back now, but we missed we missed the question.
So the question is, do companies have to cater to America sweet preferences, or do you think that maybe, I'm stretching, I'm reaching to the end of the book, and your visit to the tobacco farm and cigar making operation by the one woman band, or is it possible for companies to actually introduce Americans to the real tobacco flavors out of Sweden? And even the sweet and fruity things out of Europe are not overly saccharine sweet like we have in America.
Yeah, you probably know more about that than I do. I did have a really interesting experience when I was in Stockholm. I got to go to the flagship store for I think they called it General Snus. Maybe it wasn't General, but it was one of the big snus companies there. And it was totally unlike anything you'd see in the US, where it didn't feel like a convenience store. It felt like a like upscale Starbucks or a nice coffee shop or a wine bar. And, they had tables where you could relax and hang out, and like nice lighting. But then they also had a make your own snus flavor blending thing going on. So when I walked in, there were like 4 or 5 consumers gathered around kind of a bar with the shop manager or someone there as well. And they were tasting different things and then creating their own blends right there in the shop. And, that would be so stigmatized in the US to try something like that.
And illegal.
And illegal, right? Yeah.
Right.
Because who knows what this new flavor is? We haven't determined if each individual's flavor is appropriate for the protection of public health. So we couldn't let them do that.
Yeah, and I think, and to that point, I think you gave that what we just mentioned some coverage in this book and in previous articles, is that, you know, you go to somewhere like Sweden, where snus is credited for reducing smoking prevalence in the absence of really any other strong or harsh tobacco control policies. And it is, I've seen pictures of, you know, going into a not quite so upscale tobacco store, but, you know, drink coolers filled with snus in every flavor and variety you could imagine. But to bring that to the United States, we have this bottleneck, which is the Tobacco Control Act and FDA regulation. And so, you know, we seem to be unable to replicate the success in Sweden because of our policies.
Yeah, completely agreed. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is except to liberalize our laws, which is going to be hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Or replace everyone at the top of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products, which also probably isn't going to happen soon.
Just wait for them to retire, I guess, or come to their senses and realize they can do more good working for Philip Morris.
That's true. If that ever happens with Brian King, we'll know we're winning.
For sure.
I had. Were you going to
go ahead? I'm searching for my last questions here.
I wanted to kind of circle back to this one, only because it kind of covers a lot of it about that, just how we're treated, you know, and where our regulations have gone in the U.S. and why I think a lot of people who vape are very, very confused as to why tobacco control doesn't like us, you know, now that we don't smoke anymore, you know, and why they want to treat vaping like smoking, and how that's becoming stigmatized too, and how it was a concerted effort. It was a purposeful. I'm missing the word I'm looking for, but they did it on purpose to delegitimize smokers from the very beginning of the anti-smoking movement. I'm just going to read it. When the relevant fronts in the war on smoking were fighting tobacco companies and pushing for smoking bans, their strategy was to stigmatize smokers by portraying them as either passive addicts victimized by big tobacco, or as unwelcome aggressors fouling smoke. That's supposed to be non-smokers' clean air. The spread of ever more expansive smoking bans, starting reasonably in airplanes but extending eventually to parks, benches, private homes, and entire towns, could never have been justified if one took the rights of smokers seriously. So professionals in tobacco control decided not to do so. And I was going to tie this in, and I'm going to drop the link in the description. But did you see that article that, and I don't know, maybe I can just pull it up, that that man, that it was so sad. It was in Canada, where he was stabbed to death for asking somebody not to vape outside. And I'll drop the link here in the chat. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but he was outside waiting, I think a coffee shop or something, waiting for his wife inside, and he was with his young daughter, and there was a man nearby vaping, and he demanded that the guy stop vaping because he was concerned about his daughter. And of course, I'm not justifying what this guy did. I mean, the vapor, obviously it was horrific and he should never have done that. But what got me about it, what jumped out at me with that, was that attitude of what I just read, of how it's been so stigmatized, and things like third-hand smoke, and now the vapor is just, you know, one small whiff and you're going to die, the Helena miracle. All that stuff has just built up to this point now where this man was so afraid of some vapor from a guy a little bit down the road that this confrontation took place, where if he had the truth about it, he probably wouldn't have, he would have been like, oh, okay, whatever, that guy's vaping down there, no big deal. But he basically has been lied to by public health, and vapors and people who smoke have been so stigmatized, and the smoke has been like one small whiff type thing will cause you to have a heart attack. And we've seen that, that he felt he needed to protect his daughter, you know, and that caused a confrontation where this crazy person ended up, you know, unfortunately the vapor happened to be a horrible person, Never should have happened. Please do not think that I'm giving him any excuse. I'm blaming public health for lying to this guy, which made him confront this guy in the first place. If he knew the truth that vaping outside, in front of his kid wasn't going to hurt her, that confrontation probably never would have happened. You know what I mean? So there's something for your next book to put in there of how deaths are being caused by tobacco control.
And I cited another example in the book it was actually a journalist who wrote she was writing about third-hand smoke.
Right.
And she said, I don't want my friends who smoke to hold my baby.
Yeah.
It's just an absurd level of worry, that you're putting yourself in that position.
Yeah, when that whole thing came out, I think there was a thing on like Ask Ann or Dear Abby or something like that, where a woman did not want to let her mother who smoked come see her new grandbaby because of it. And you're starting to see things where, well, this parent smokes, this parent doesn't, so the parent who doesn't smoke gets the kid. Or people who vape can't be foster parents. I mean, there's that's a law I came across a lot when I was updating the state pages for the CASAA site the other day, looking for what laws are on the books. And there was a lot of laws where you can't vape if you're a foster parent. You obviously can't smoke because that was already in place. They just added vaping to that. And now how many decent people have you taken out of the loop that they just happen to use nicotine? I mean, could you imagine if they said, if you drink coffee or if you ever have a glass of wine, you can't ever be a foster parent? Right. I mean, I don't know. It just, that's why I want people to read this, because I think you give a really great sort of, for even people who vape, because we ourselves have been given this line, or all these I should say plural lines, of how, we believe it all. We believe that snus and chew causes mouth cancer more than smoking would. We believe that, smoking makes your lungs black. We believe that, one whiff will make you drop from a heart attack. I mean, a lot of vapors believe that still. And, like they don't want to vape around people. Now I was thinking it'll kill your pets if you vape in the house. I'm seeing that now. I mean, it's just, they need to read. That's why I want people to read stuff like this so they can see this history. I think you did a really great job of pulling a lot of that together without making it really like, long and drawn out of like dates and lots of surgeon generals and stuff like that. That you're like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't, I mean, I knew a lot of it, but I mean, the third-hand smoke, some of the stuff that you brought up, I hadn't known. Alex said too, you said that you hadn't realized it had gotten as crazy.
Yeah, I hadn't realized it had caught on so much, and I realized we're kind of coming to the end here, so I did want to get at least one thing kind of in that sort of popped up through this conversation, which was this tactic of stigmatizing and dehumanizing and alienating people is as old as the tobacco issue. And I appreciate that you dropped the King James first quote in there from counterblast to tobacco. Which I don't think that specific quote actually went into it, but throughout that little book, ultimately he gets to a point of essentially comparing people who use tobacco to the savages from whence the tobacco plant came. And so
it's casual racism to go in with the
light racism. And so and that, of course, it's just another thing where, this idea of that we need this, heavy coercion and so on. It has its roots in racism and classism and all of the isms that are bad. So, ultimately the question is, as we're talking about people who are so fearful of being around folks who smoke, at the same time, we also have the issue of, Massachusetts, New York, California, where flavors have been banned. And now, as predicted, we're seeing, the people who are selling drugs illegally. Now, these are products that they're adding to their inventory. And so the same, if you're worried about your kids buying vapes from a vape shop, just wait till they start buying it from someone selling drugs. And this was predictable. We know this is happening in spite of all of the downplaying by the anti-groups. So ultimately the question is, what's it going to take for the controllers to realize that they've turned the screws too tight and they're actually causing more harm, and we're just repeating the mistakes of the past?
Yeah, you're starting to see them retreat a little bit. I think, where they used to say when discussing flavor bans or menthol bans, like, oh, nobody's going to get arrested for this. It's just regulation. And now they've kind of pulled back a little bit, and they're saying, well, people who smoke or vape aren't going to get arrested. And like, that was never really the fear. Like, anybody who thought that, somebody smoking a menthol was going to be, clubbed and pulled in the back of a police truck, that was never a serious objection anyway.
But don't vape on a boardwalk in Maryland or Atlanta.
That's true. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the more routine fear is that this is going to create illicit markets, and that police are then going to start enforcing against those. And, sellers, which doesn't mean executives at Altria or RJ Reynolds. It means mostly like minority owners of convenience stores and
Eric Gardners of the world.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about successful, rich, highly educated people who are probably going to be smuggling flavored vapes and flavored cigarettes. That's not who's going to bear the brunt of this enforcement. So yeah, so there's a lot of ignorance about how this works. And again, the press is failing to push back on this, because the
liberal press, you'd think, they'd push back, but we're the last. I used to say we and obese people were the last groups that you could completely make fun of and hate, and it was okay. Well, now obese people aren't even in that. It's just. And even cigarette smokers aren't in it either. Now there's people get vape shamed. I mean, Google vape shaming one of these times, or even do a hashtag on Twitter, and people like, we need to start vape shaming people. They should just go back to smoking. I mean, it's like, and you with the Eric Gardner, you put that in there, and I think a lot of vapors and people who smoke even don't realize how that whole thing started with Eric Gardner, and why police were even approaching him and trying to arrest him in the first place. And it was because he was selling individual cigarettes, which tobacco control, in their wisdom, thought, well, if we make them buy a full pack, then it'll be better for them. No, then you'll get your taxes, and that's it. Ignoring the fact that the pack was bought and the tax was paid at the time the tax was bought. But
yeah, and the thing that people miss when they cover this issue is that the pro-ban people can truthfully point at the law and say, well, this is just a regulation. It doesn't involve the police at all. They're not the ones empowered to enforce this, completely ignoring the fact that there are already tax laws on the books, so that when people bring these products in from elsewhere, they're committing a felony. And there are state task forces whose job is to enforce these tax laws. So true, yeah, you bring in some flavored vapes, or you bring in some menthol cigarettes, you're not going to be sent to prison or arrested because of the flavor ban. You're going to be sent to prison or arrested because of the tax law, but the outcome is the same. And and we're seeing it happen. And you'll see people in public health and journalists say like, oh, we passed this law in Massachusetts and it's been fine, just ignoring like the state's own reports saying that cross-border smuggling is now their biggest issue of enforcement, and making a literal bullet point list of seizures and arrests that they've made and felony prosecutions that are currently in process. So
they doubled down. They doubled down and like, well, when we banned menthol, less menthol cigarettes were sold in Massachusetts. So it's a win. It's like, talk about cherry picking.
And I think we're going to very quickly go to this transition of, if we ban these products, nobody's going to go to jail, to, well, if we ban these products, only bad people will go to jail. It'll no longer be possible to deny that it's happening. They'll just say, well, these are bad people who are breaking the law.
Yeah. So we are coming up on the end here. I know you've got a hard stop in a few minutes here, so we're going to wrap things up. But before I do, I did want to give you the opportunity to fill in any blanks or anything we didn't cover enough. Anything to add?
I think we covered it. I think we did a great job covering this. So thanks for picking up everything. I'll make the short pitch. It is, I think, a pretty easy read. It's short. It's broken up into separate articles. Some of them are quite short, some are longer, but it covers a lot of ground. If you're interested in these issues, I think you'll get a lot out of it if you haven't read a lot of these things before, if it's been a long time, and it'd be a great thing to share with other people who are interested in it. To make one last plug, I'll say Amazon reviews help a lot. So if you get the book and you enjoy it, or even if you don't, I think right now it doesn't have any reviews yet. It's been selling pretty well, but nobody's reviewed it. So
I just finished it this morning. So.
All right, yeah. If you want to be the first, that's always helpful too.
You guys, links are in the description below. There's a link to Jacob's website, directly to the Amazon listing, and to his Twitter account. Give him a follow. He tweets some great stuff and gives me a heads up on stuff sometimes too that I don't even know what's going on. So it's good. And he's got 2 really good books. And Alex, did we ever start our reading list page? I can't remember.
Yes, we don't have a page for it, but there's a slide tray. I think it's on the resources page, and books will flow by. And I know we'll need to add this to that list as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll add that. Actually, I think I'll just do a darn post. We need a post with everything on one page so people can find it, because there's some good stuff out there, and 2 of the books for sure that should need to be on that regarding tobacco harm reduction and vaping and all that are Jacob's. So that's why we keep having him back. He knows what he's talking about. Not being a vapor himself, it's pretty refreshing to see that. So. But you smoke.
Yes. And yeah, one last bit here. What's next as far as coverage on this issue for you, or other stuff that you're writing about?
Yeah, let's see. I've got a couple ideas for articles, but they're not quite fully developed yet. But I think I can probably say that I'll probably have one in an upcoming issue of Reason magazine, which is a great website magazine if you're interested in these issues, and publishes a lot of my work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe this time I mean it, and I'm done writing about this. Maybe it's finally over. I said it on now.
There's be so much more happening soon. You know that. You know that. You just keep getting sucked back in, don't you? And the funny thing is how you end up. You said you tend to lean a little liberal, and you end up agreeing and being on all these sort of more libertarian, sort of think tank things and publications. And I read Reason before, just because I kind of am that center libertarian, but I became that after I became a vapor, after I switched and saw this happening. And that's something that I think vapors need to do, is take back their agency, take back their right to enjoy things, to have their own space. Don't let people keep pushing you in the corner, and read this book and find out how that's happening. It'll open your eyes, and you're going to be like, hey, yeah, right. Why are we letting them do that? Why do non-smokers get to have all the restaurants, and why can't we have a couple bars to ourselves, or this bowling alley over here could be smoking that? From a libertarian point of view, it's the capitalism, I guess, will decide which the non-smoking or the smoking place will do well. And this non-smoking places will do great. Like you said, I'm happy to go in a bar and not come home reeking of cigarette smoke myself, but I'd like to still go in some places and vape. We can still do that here in my town, which is nice, but not smoke. We can vape. But but yeah, it's why can't we have that back? Why can't we? And did you read Clive's article, recent one about that?
I've got it in my bookmark.
Yeah, you should read it, because it goes along those lines of what's wrong with looking at nicotine as being something like caffeine and alcohol and cigars, and something that people can enjoy, and not just something that somebody's addicted to, and that's the only reason we use it, But sorry, I'm done.
So yeah. And really quick, I tried to get, so for people who don't know your other work, you also write, as we mentioned, beverages. I know you have another book out, and it's sitting on your desk, and I'm trying to get you to hold it up.
If anybody's interested in other vices, I do have a recent book out on home bartending. So if you like cocktails, this is meant to be a very approachable guide to how to make drinks at home and stock your home bar. Can definitely tell you from the beginning, way more commercially successful than books about tobacco policy. Also,
I need to get that one. My husband's getting into that. I got him a bar kit for Christmas.
Yeah. Also, graphic design on this is way more than I can pull off with
it's
my
very
books.
pretty.
Yeah,
the hardcover looks very nice.
On a very lighter topic, if you want something else fun to add to your home book collection, that would be one to check out.
Fantastic. Lighter for now, anyway.
Yeah.
So, but again, thank you for coming on a Saturday, and we really appreciate your time and your work on this issue. Like I said, we will have Jacob's book in our little recommendation tray on our resources page, I believe, for people to go check out. And the link to go find the book is in the description on this video. Also in the links in the description are going to be all the current calls to action. So we're not going to take your time with a legislative rundown tonight. But just, make sure you check. If you're curious about what's going on in your state, we've got resources for that on our website. Go to the Get Involved tab and you can see and you'll get to the big clicky map and you can find out what's going on in your state, or research the current policies that are affecting your access to safer tobacco and nicotine products. And I'm going to rapid fire go down the list of things we got to do to close this out.
No worries. Here, I got a few minutes.
Don't afraid. Hang out for just a minute after we're done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to make sure we get everybody in the back room here. So if you are watching this live stream or listening to the replay, first of all, thank you for listening to the replay. Thank you for showing up live. But if you're not a CASAA member, then you're doing it all wrong. Go to CASAA.org and join. It's absolutely free. You can either opt in on the website or take action through one of our engagements. And you'll be signed up as a member. Don't worry, we're not going to hit you with a bunch of spam. We've been criticized for not sending out enough emails. The most you're going to get on a regular basis are reminders that this show happened, and it's available on all the places where you get podcasts, Spotify, StreamYard. I don't know if we're on Apple Podcasts. We are definitely on YouTube. So catch the replays, share the replays, share Jacob's book. And while you're on our website looking for all of the resources, don't forget or remember to pick up some merch and advocate in style. We've got t-shirts Danielle has designed, and they look amazing. So pick up some CASAA t-shirts and walk around town and tell people that you are a free-thinking adult, you like flavors, and you want to vape, and that everybody else should have the same right. I think I got everything. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the things. Find your state groups, get connected. You can find that through our website, or just go on Facebook and look for your state group. That's where people should be, but not so much anymore. But go in, spark up the conversation, and talk about policies that are happening in your state, in your town. Get to meet one another, and we can all work on this together. And so with that, I think we're finished.
I'm just going to add that last month I just finished updating all of the state pages, so they should all be up to date. And if you want to check out your state on the CASAA.org, let me know if I've missed anything. But that's all updated. If you need that information too, calls to action are all on there and everything as well.
Do we need? I know you have the I Vape, I Vote t-shirts, but do you have anything for the I don't vape but I support freedom? Is that
not yet? But I'm gonna. I feel like Danielle will accept that challenge.
Yes, and she would make it awesome.
To sign her up for work. But all right.
All right.
With that,
always good to be on.
Yep. Likewise. Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.